Is the farming organic?
It's biodynamic. Yeah, we were actually one of the we were after Nicolas Joly. Noel was pretty much the second guy to turn that leaf. He was certified in 1990. Started experimenting in '86. So everybody was looking at him like, "Who are you? You're a weirdo, you know, cuckoo." And even to this day, he says, "I don't know what it does, or if it has any effect on, you know, the wines, but I like the wines I've been producing in the last 30 years, 20 years, sorry, so I'm not going to change anything."
No, everybody seems to have a hard time explaining exactly what the procedures do, but it also, it doesn't seem like it's an accident that a lot of the great domains in the wine world are biodynamic.
Yeah, we were just talking about how it just naturally makes you pay more attention to the vineyards and to what's going on in the fields, and if you're paying more attention, you're more in tune with it, and you have a better understanding, and you know kind of where to react and what needs to be done, which I get. We were able actually to see the effects of biodynamic farming firsthand in Kiralyudvar. We started experimenting with it a couple years ago and saw that the juices were naturally rounder, more elegant. The ripening was more even across the board. In vintages, there's been a couple of vintages, one vintage that where most of our fellow producers lost all of their crop. We were able to harvest wines because the ripening was a little bit more advanced and rounder, and the berries were ready, and that must have been only due to biodynamic farming. And so at Kiralyudvar we made the transition, and we're just recently certified biodynamic too. So,
well, you know,
something's working.
I don't think you've had a lot of exposure to Holleran wines from Oregon, but you really need to look at them because, if nothing else, they are poster children for the effect of biodynamics. And Bill Holleran has a tremendous experience, and he's sort of in the situation that you are, that I don't think he ever intended necessarily to be in the wine business, but after 10 years of doing this, and working with Jay Summers from J. Christopher and Dr. Lucen, when I asked that question that Len asked you to Bill Holleran, he said, "My plants have stronger immune systems." That's, to me, what it does. And he said, "There's no doubt about it because there's phylloxera across the road, and we're doing the same thing, and I'm watching the phylloxera go from this radius that's, you know, 500 meters down to 6 meters just because of biodynamics."
So it's preventative as opposed
well, it's preventative, but
cure.
It's a stronger plant. And, you know, we all talk about the advantage of stressing a plant. Well, do you want to stress a weak plant or a strong plant? So you can have it both ways, in the sense that you're not doing drip irrigation or whatever thing you're doing that you believe is good for the plant in terms of lowering yields naturally, pre-pruning kind of, and then afterwards, but at the same time you're giving this plant a really strong immune system. And it's got to be the best of all worlds by taking those two theories, which are not mutually exclusive, and employing them. And so for him, and he has photographs to prove it, the effect of biodynamics on diseased vineyards.
Yeah, it's the EU right now is a huge proponent of getting farmers to farm biodynamically. They've offered a lot of incentives, especially in the past year, which is great. And I think that, you know, people often say, "Oh, biodynamic farming, it's so expensive." It's not really necessarily more expensive. It does take more time and more attention. At the end of the day, it's probably less expensive than the systemics and, you know, all the chemicals and spraying and stuff. But it does take that added layer that necessitates the attention that some people just don't want to, can't afford to. take and spend time on.
In terms, though, of a size of a winery and their holdings, it would probably be more difficult, though, for a larger producer to convert to biodynamics, I would guess.
Well, it depends on their particular economic situation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, you look in larger producers in the Rhone, I imagine they actually have the resources to do it because of their sales, their sales networks and their business models. But yeah, I'm sure you're right.
But if they're sourcing from, outside of the estate, I mean, that's
true. And then that's Schaaf's experience with his, I think, with his negociant wines like the Moncourt and the Offers and stuff like that, is that he made as a requirement in his contracts organic farming and a bunch of other things, but that doesn't guarantee you enough control.
Ultimate control
over
it's very
and ran into some embarrassing problems at various times because of it. So yeah, you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, one thing that it did force us to do at Kiralyudvar is it's Burgundian in that you can own just 2 rows and somebody owns another row, and we try to get plots and parcels, but it's and over the years we've done that for the most part, but there are a few where you're very close to your neighbors, and if they're spraying right next to you, what are you going to do? And so it's created a conversation. It's forced people to kind of look to see what's working and what's not. Our neighbors did see that, when we went out 2 weeks earlier than everybody else could, everybody came out too, but their berries just weren't ready, and then they lost their crop. Well, what could that be? And so just to get that conversation started is great. And just to have people maybe even just pay more attention, because if you lose all your crop, then there's nothing coming back in. You've spent all that money and stuff. So
no, I agree too. And it's the same down the chain, so to speak, with importers and wholesale and then a retailer or a restaurant, trying to convey the same kind of information to the consumer who may not care or really want to know what it all is, but if it makes a nicer glass of wine for them, then they can be a little more aware maybe of why that is, then they can start to pay attention to it at least.
I agree.
But yeah, it's a long process.